The Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, comedy on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And without further ado, I want to bring back a friend of the program. Quite honestly, I did not expect that one of the last live performances in music I would see would be him. But in fact, it was in New York under the leadership of Todd Sikafus and this big band. And he walked in. My guest walked in effortlessly, looked at a couple of chord charts and sheet music, and just began to play off the top of his head. He didn't have time to think. He just burned, just like the old school cats. And quite honestly, if we ever do get back on the other side of this morass, my guest is one of the cats who's a link in the chain to future generations' understanding of how real music is made. Erik Deutsch, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hey, Jake. Thanks for that introduction, man. That was great.
Well, it's true, man. I do want you to just talk to younger cats out there who are very guarded about. We talked about this a little bit last time, but I guess more to the point, not so much guarding like their content and, trying to make it perfect, but more to the idea of like getting into a situation where someone's like, go get your horn, and you don't have time to think. You go get your horn and you just have to play. I just did another interview with this great trombone player out of Detroit, George Bohannon, great studio bone player. And he came up in Detroit, and he used to go to this place called the Macarena Club, which is American spelled backwards. And Hugh Lawson and Frank Gant were playing in like a duo there. It was just like piano and drums. They'd just be playing ballads. So he'd go down just for a reprieve, and pretty soon they were like, yo, go get your horn. Go get your bone. Go get your trombone. They weren't asking him. They were telling him. And then he got on the bandstand, and they're calling off tunes, and he's just playing off the top. He had no time to think. There was no real book. He couldn't study anything for 4 weeks. He just had to go. And I wanted you to talk about in your own career how you learned to, even if you didn't necessarily feel like you belonged, you just had to hit it, and there was no time to think. And if you could talk to younger cats about how that has helped you grow in your just in your own constitution as a musician.
And I'm thinking a lot. It brings up a lot of thoughts about what's changed and what was good and what was bad and what's better now and how things are and why they changed. But for sure, I started out my jazz career kind of being thrown in with people that were better than me, So I started jamming with friends in middle school and early high school. But then I was kind of in a jazz band in high school that was all seniors or all upper class, and I was the only freshman in it. And this was in the D.C. area in Maryland. And so right away, my first jazz thing, I was kind of over my head, and there was a lot of good players at my school. And then as I got the bug for jazz music, as I got kind of overtaken and passionate about it when I was later in high school, when I was a junior and senior, I started going down to clubs in D.C. and playing at clubs, sitting in on jam sessions, And so there I was thrown in for sure, way over my head. I was really nervous about not knowing the tune. There was pressure not to have charts, and that, like you're saying, no real books. So that was a nerve-wracking experience, and I threw myself in that. And then what we did in high school, me and my peers, we started hiring. There was a jazz club called Twins in D.C. It's still around, run by these lovely Ethiopian ladies that were twins, and they would give us nights of our own, like a Tuesday night. And what we did was we hired cats from the scene. So I remember my first Tuesday I ever had at Twins. It was for a trio hit. And they just pay you the door, I think.
Right.
And what I did was I got the phone numbers of two guys, and I called them. One of them was, I think it was James King, a bassist, and it's a trip, man, because I'm looking back on that. He was a guy in an older black gentleman in his late 60s.
Oh, my God. This is like the stalwarts, dude. I love it, dude. I love it.
Yeah, and DC was a really working class music scene. Like there's a lot of working musicians there, but not a lot of famous musicians, you know?
Definitely.
So it was just a really working class blue collar jazz scene, but like some good guys for sure. And and a lot of history. So I called James King up, and I just remember I called, and his wife answered, and I said, "Hey, James, it's Erik Deutsch." And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "You know, I have this gig. I can pay you $50." And he said, "Okay." And that was it. You know, and he wrote his book. And then 3 weeks, and then there was a drummer, a guy. I think I hired someone who subbed it out, actually, if I recall. There was another guy came, but anyway, so right there, I was way over my head. That was a 3-set trio gig.
Wow.
And I had I basically had formulated a list of 20 tunes for those 3 sets or 18 tunes or whatever it was. And, you know, they were basic standards, but, you know, I call them and we played, and I invited people out. And so right there, I was over my head, you know, and that continued in college in some different ways. But most notably when Ron Miles, when I met Ron Miles, a trumpeter from Denver.
Yeah.
Wonderful player. Do you know him, Jake?
I need to catch. You've dropped his name a couple. I got to catch a hang with that cat.
Oh, he works with Frizzell since '94. He joined Frizzell's band.
Yeah, no, he's a badass.
He's been a prominent voice in that band ever since. He's wonderful. He's a wonderful musician. I mean, he's worked with Elvis Costello, Don Byron, all kinds of folks, and Jackie Jeanette. And he's killing. And he's super deep, and he's a great composer, and he's a true original voice, and he's the most original jazz voice that ever existed in Denver, I would say, pretty surely, with a close competition with my teacher, Art Landy.
Well, you're talking about currently living. I mean, I'm just like current, because I mean, Cedar Walton came out of there. Landy is out of his mind. He's like a freaking avatar, man.
Yeah, I mean, Cedar Walton's from Denver.
He is, yeah. I got to send you that interview, dude. That was old school. He's from Denver.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so you should talk to Tony Mason about Cedar. Tony used to see Cedar at the Bodega on Park Slope a lot.
Oh, my God. I love Mace.
Okay, so, let me say that. Ron is the most prominent living voice that's from Denver.
Yes.
And that includes compositionally and playing and kind of success in all different genres. I did a lot back then. I asked him if he'd give me a lesson. Found him at a gig, you know, and he said, "Okay, come by the office." And I went by his office, and he was late. He was like at a dentist appointment, and he came in. And this was at the University of CU Denver. Oh God! So I came in his office down there, and we had only about 30 minutes to work or something in that time that we had allotted. And we did it. We played, and he gave me some tips. And then I tried to pay him, and he said, "No, he wouldn't take my money," which was insane. And then, next thing I know, he hired me. I think right about when I was about 20, I think. So, and going on a gig with Ron and his outstanding band, which I believe was Kent McClagan or Artie Moore and Tim Sullivan. Those guys, they were like way above my head, and the compositions that Ron was presenting were very, very advanced. And I look back on them now, every now and then, and they kind of blow my mind, like how unique and challenging and beautiful they are. So that was a situation where I was definitely above my head, but definitely I knew that this was a deal, that playing with Ron was exhilarating and an honor, you know, especially at that age. And I just went for it. And so I think that the advantages and the education that gave me as a player was just like a little bit of a sense of fearlessness and a sense of confidence, so that when you're with your peers, you know, or you're with folks that are maybe not quite on your own level, you have that knowledge of like where you've been, the challenges that you've risen to and found success. And I think it for sure helped me with a sense of fearlessness on the bandstand and a sense of confidence that I can be a little over my head, and I just gotta bring it, and you know, good things will happen.
Yeah.
And of course, living in New York and gigging in New York for 14 years, that of course re-emphasized that, and added to that energy. You know what I mean?
No, it's well. I mean, were there like heavy cut sessions that you were ever part of? I mean, in the sense like I just know like there were Denny Sywell, who was the original drummer in Wings, like Lou Donaldson kicked him off the bandstand because he didn't know how to play a shuffle, and it wasn't like he was being he was just being himself. But the point is, Denny had to go back and he kind of figured out what Lou wanted, and he got back on the bandstand. That was happening with guys from the Arts Ensemble of Chicago. And, it was like a brotherhood. The intention wasn't to, like, crush somebody's ego or hurt somebody's feelings and that they'd never come back. It was more like, you got to work on this, man. You got, this is, I guess going back to this bass player, this hard scrabble, blue-collar bass player from D.C., I mean, so many of these guys, they were ear-trained before they learned to sight read. I feel like maybe how big were your ears early on in your life? Did you learn by ear first, or were you reading music? Because I feel like cats' ears are locked today because they're basically they're brought up learning to read music instead of hearing it first.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, two different questions: the listening and then the what I think is actually hazing. That what you're talking about with the jazz.
The hazing. There's a hazing. Yeah, that's. I mean, it's not like It was kind of a hazing element. So two things. Let's talk about the ears first, and we'll backtrack to the hazing. I think that, I started my music with Suzuki piano, which is a classical method based on the ear and not the sight reading. Do you know about that at all, Jake? I mean, that's fascinating. There was no sight reading. It was all ear.
Well, here's the deal. The Suzuki is a method invented by a Japanese educator, and it was simple. He wrote a book called Nurtured by Love, and it just talks about, hey, music is like language. Music is a language. We don't teach kids to read before they speak.
Right.
We teach them to speak before they read. That's a simple, basis.
I love it.
So I started Suzuki piano at Vanderbilt University in 1982 when I was 6 years old, and it's about natural like inclination with the instrument, the right age, yada yada, the right parents, the right support. But the teacher was great. So my ears were big from the beginning, and it turns out there was no reading. Not totally true. The first year, no reading. I think second year they start to incorporate reading, and basically your reading's behind your ear training when you start. And I remember, Jake, improvising in first grade in my class. We had a piano in my classroom in Nashville in the school, and we had done a recess or something, and everybody was tired and we were going to take a nap, and the teacher said, hey, do you want to play something while people fall asleep? And I remember, I totally remember being like, I'm just going to make something up. And I kind of made something up that was like a Suzuki piece, and I improvised a little lullaby. I just remember doing that while people in front of the class. And the deal is that Suzuki music is harder from the beginning. The traditional method has simple beginner piano music. The Suzuki method starts harder. Two hands just kind of going and doing different things, and you learn it by ear and by eye, by watching, So the answer is my ears were strong from the beginning. I think that there's a knock on classical musicians knock Suzuki kids because their reading isn't as good as other traditionally trained classical musicians, which can be an issue in classical music. And I will be the first to admit that my classical reading is a little subpar to two-handed reading.
Right.
But my jazz reading got whipped into shape in my 20s by Art Landy and Ron Miles. I give him some credit for that too. That music he presented to me all the time. So cats these days, yeah, you're right, man. It's a music. The music isn't taught. The jazz idiom isn't taught from the ear and watching and immersion. As people aren't learning it as much from that as they are learning it from school. And you got to a simple reason is like, when I went to college, there was only, probably 8 or 10 jazz majors in the country, and 5 of those were conservatories. They didn't have a jazz major at my school at Boulder. Now they do. Now all major state universities have jazz majors, I believe, or most of them.
Exactly. And then this is the thing. This is what happens. You can't codify that language. So go ahead. I mean, that's the problem.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, man. That's what my beef is.
It's gone from a foundation, in my opinion, a foundation in blues and ear thing to a foundation more in academia.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, it's also become a whiter thing, which is cool. Of course, I'm a white jazz musician, and there's there are a lot of good ones.
Absolutely,
It's just kind of unfortunate, and like especially in the midst of Black Lives Matter movement that we're in here, like it is worthy of note that this is music created by Black Americans, and like Duke Ellington said, it's America's classical music, and along the way here in the last 30, 40 years, I'd say, the music kind of left Black culture, or left Black culture, or got left out of Black culture, or was commandeered by white culture. I'm not sure it was totally that, but it's some combination of all that stuff, and that's just like kind of unfortunate, obviously.
Let me ask you, this is really, I hate to be like, contrarian. I'm more interested, like, from your point of view, how exhilarating was it? You were already kind of like, the music chose you anyway. Like you're kind of a conduit. You are a conduit, and it's really cool. But can you remember back to the feeling of how exciting it was to come? The Suzuki method was challenging, but the fact that you were learning how to improvise. So many kids. Like my daughter is a fantastic pianist, and I finally actually had to actually get in her really kind of not confront her teacher, but basically push her teacher to have her stretch out, play more blues scales, and I sent her like these trio Bill Evans pieces, like piece, and like my daughter's finally learning to stretch out and play some different stuff. But I think so many kids look at music and it's like a drag because they're constantly taking directives based on the classical model and that kind of idiom. And I just wonder if you could talk about how geeked up you were. You were geeked up anyway, but the fact is that method tapped into something that was already part of your true nature. And I just want to know how quickly you were just fired up about music based on the fact that you were ear trained first off the Suzuki method.
I think it's hard to say how fired up I was. I was just a kid. It was kind of like just something I did, like doing a sport or like dance. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And so the lessons were cool, but it wasn't like, I just liked. I think I liked it because I was good at it. It's like if you start,
I dig.
When you're in kindergarten, if you start, if you're the best, long distance runner in your school, you're the best, got the best mile time. You kind of probably like running. So I was kind of like, I was just good at it. I liked it. I had a good teacher, and my brother did it, and my sister did it, and but I did start jamming in 4th grade with a cat in my school who played drums, and he was terrible. But we got together, and I had the keyboard.
Oh, that is sick. 4th grade, you were doing piano, drums, jams. That's the old school method, man.
Yeah. Rock and roll.
That's great.
Playing Twist and Shout, and Louie. And that So that's where it started. So that's where the passion. I think I was like pretty psyched about that, and then it got, and basically we moved back to the DC area where I was born from Nashville when I was in 5th grade in '87. Got a new piano teacher. She was a tough teacher, traditional. I didn't like it. I didn't practice, but I did start jamming more with friends. So little by little on the side, I was doing more rock. I was doing this. So as the classical became a drag, as it often does, especially because my reading wasn't good enough. So it took me forever to learn the harder pieces, And so it's 5th, 6th, 7th grade. I'm getting into 8th grade, I'm getting into harder classical music, and you know what? I wasn't reading fast enough. I wasn't practicing enough, and I basically started floundering. But on the side, I was coming up with the jams with my buddies, and that's just around the age when people start to be able to play guitar and shit, you know?
Exactly. That sounds a little bit early. Yeah, that's great. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, that, you know, middle school people start playing guitar. No one plays guitar in elementary school, you know. I also played in the band. I played baritone horn and the saxophone in the band, so I was doing band stuff too.
Wow.
You know? And school band, yeah. But so the passion, you know, it's just like I think that like I was doing all this stuff, and the rock and roll thing in 8th grade, 9th grade, that got really fun. I had a little band, and that was super awesome when we were practicing all the time and playing some gigs at parties, and that was awesome. And it was the passion, like I mean, like I said, the senior year in high school is when I caught the jazz passion, and it's kind of no coincidence that I kind of caught the Grateful Dead passion around that era too.
Mm-hmm.
So those things are super connected, and I was lucky to have that DC scene, that old school scene where there was jam sessions at clubs all weekend long, really city clubs. I mean, deep clubs, pretty, you know, clubs that are like, we were being 16-year-old white kids from the suburbs, we were like, you know, we stood out.
Oh, I did it. I did. You were channeling like Pat Martino it smelled like a urinal in there. You know, it was like really nasty, but you guys were burning it up.
Yeah, they were nasty. Nasty clubs. The one step down, Twins, the HR 57. These are our hangs. In the one step down, which is at Washington Circle in DC outside Georgetown, that club had a jam session from noon to 6 on Saturday and Sunday. Noon to 6.
Wow.
And it was a real dive, where the piano was built into the end of the bar. The bar connected to the piano. I don't even know.
Dude, that's so old. That is the most old school. Oh my God. Were you around for, I just trying to figure, were Kofi and O'Teal Burbridge around at that time?
No, not that I knew of. They from DC? I thought they were from Atlanta or something.
No, they grew up in, they grew up in I think, the New York area, but then they wound up. I mean, I just know Kofi was on the bandstand with Donald Byrd. I figured it might be a little bit before you, but they were down in D.C. I mean, there's just so much. To me, it's like, you know, what an honor to be joined by Erik Deutsch. I got a game. We got a game. Name that voice. I don't expect you to know who it is, but pay attention to the content, and then we'll come back.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Use the word culture. And to me, that's what our society has become, a monstrous civilization and a very little culture. In other words, there's no balance. At one time, you had civilization and culture.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's all civilization, very, very little culture. And even in the cultural arena, music is way down. I mean, we're having this problem at the New School right now. We're part of the New School University, and our school is the New School for Jazz. It used to be the New School for Jazz. Now they changed it to New School for Jazz and Contemporary Music, which to me sucks, but that's what they did.
Yeah.
And that's because even now we're holding our own, man. Every semester, every year, we're overbooked, you know, with students. But yet, but the university still has a tendency to look down upon us, man, because because we're dealing with jazz music. You've got a Parsons School of Design. You got thousands of students coming in because they want to make design clothes, and they want to get involved with, as we say, the civilization. The cultural part of the school is always downplayed. We always get, when it comes to funding, we get the lesser of the funds. And you know what, man? I kind of don't see that as being corrected anytime soon. My thing to deal with these very, very disappointing situations that we have to deal with is I just try to play my ass off,
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I just make you listen to me. So you may not want to fund me, but you got to admit that I'm playing some great drums, and you're going to leave here electrified with what I do. It may not make any changes, in the society. I don't care now. I'm at That's one good thing about being an octogenarian. And I'm still in like great health, and I'm still like I have great energy.
You are sharp as a knife, man.
Yeah.
No,
and,
but
You want to take a guess at who that is?
I got one guess. Maybe it's off, but I'm just going to go for it anyway.
Throw it.
Billy Hart?
You know, it's a great guess because he did say New School. That was 10 years ago I did that interview, Deutsch. That's how long I've been on this mission. That was Charlie Persip.
Okay. Yeah. I was just thinking a drum teacher at the New School in his 80s, you know.
Yeah,
Billy Hart, I think, was at Manhattan. But anyway.
No. Billy was Charlie Persip, one of the greatest drummers in the history of jazz. And he. Yeah. What I wanted to ask you about, and this is more a question for why you chose to move to Mexico City, setting aside the current situation. He made this point about we are one big civilization with no culture. And I know what he's talking. I didn't know what he really meant then, but the fact is that with interconnection, full interconnection, and this has been a process that's been happening for a long time, it's taken away a lot of most of the regionalism, at least in the lower 48 in the United States. I mean, I'd venture to say New Orleans might be the last real regional bastion of music where if you go back to the 60s, I mean, every town had their own rhythm. Every town had their own shuffle beat. It was and so I said, my thought was, I wanted to play that for you because I wanted you to talk about how much the culture of Mexico City was enticing to you as a musician because it still seems like that's intact.
Yeah, man. All really good points. I tend, I'm generally I'm more of an optimist about everything, about modern culture, modern music, state of things. I think that in that regard, I would say that I think that these cities still do have identities, but not as unique as they once were. That's for sure. You know what I mean? Like Denver and Nashville, and Chicago and KC, and, there's in Seattle, there's San Francisco. There's identities, maybe not in the sounds, Jake,
Yeah.
And like the unique, the shuffle, like a beat, but in the community of musicians and the way they think, that still exists because even with all the connectedness,
Yes.
it's like cats in Denver still got to work and play with each other. And I'm talking about the guys that work the gigs in town, not the guys that are always on the road, and the big bands.
I dig, yeah.
So the cats who are just like playing together on a nightly basis, there's got to be a unified sound, or else it doesn't. In most places, for a lack of a better term, you know what I mean? But and DC's always been a little more straight ahead, and so on and so forth. But Mexico City is a vibrant scene. I dig the excitedness about musicians. They're very positive. They're very into playing. They are not jaded.
Yeah.
They're not dated here.
Yeah, I love that.
Thing that I was like,
yeah.
I'm super aware of being a New Yorker and becoming jaded, and like it's like kind of like it just happens. Like you just kind of find yourself complaining about stuff. You find yourself,
it's just I'm a Long Island guy. I couldn't live there anymore. It was like the tempo is so high and the anxiety is. Anyway, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut. Go ahead.
Yeah, but no, you're right. It's like not only complaining about shit, but kind of like coveting your neighbor's gig a little too much. You know what I mean? Sometimes, and why didn't I get that call? And like, why didn't that person call me anymore? And why didn't that fucking club? Sorry about this.
That's all right. It's fine. It's fine.
Why doesn't that club, want me to play anymore? And you start getting into that vibe, and it's just like it's so silly because in the end, there's so much work in New York to go around. You can't do every gig, man. You know what I mean? Like, there's like you get this mindset that you should have all those good calls. But so Mexico is a nice relief from that energy, and the more we get bogged down in that kind of negative stuff, just the more it weighs on our creative energy for sure. It's like so. I'm kind of into and nobody's perfect. I'm definitely not, but I'm trying to into kind of getting a little away from that, and starting to recognize situations that bring that on and try to avoid them. Mexico's, these cats aren't jaded. They love to play. They love to hang. They love to, which is like New York. They like to, nobody like shows up and then leaves right after the gig. They all want to stay. Everybody likes to eat here together. People eat together, which is unlike in New York. You don't eat together as much.
It's very true. Such a It's such a big part of like. I remember Mickey Roker talking about like, just like the food was so, so ensconced with the music and the vibe and the brother and the sisterhood of that time. So there's a transient nature to, some of these metropolises, and I think sometimes, sometimes I just think that you can begin to lose sight of. What you have in these. Would you say that you were getting, that you'd already be booked for a gig, but you'd be upset that like you didn't get another gig, even though you were already working? Like it was that kind of sort of,
maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe possible. Or like there, you find yourself in situations where like with a certain singer, perhaps like that you worked with that didn't want kind of worked and started working with somebody else, and you start, you find yourself, and like, I don't want to say that I just saw this around me a lot, and I'm also guilty of it. I think I was a little better than some cats, but like, just being around the energy is tough. But, a certain singer you're working with, and that then they don't want to work with you anymore, and like, you never really like playing with them anyway, but you still find yourself complaining about it, when it was almost like they did you a favor, or they actually, they noticed that you probably weren't that into it, and so they did the smart thing for them, which is they hired somebody who would be, and who would be a little easier to work with, and that's real, and that's the messed up thing, is that in New York sometimes you can kind of not have a great vibe about rehearsal, this is a bummer, like I got to go to the sound check, or I got to haul my keyboard, blah blah blah. You kind of find yourself kind of grumbling about stuff, and then you wonder why someone might want to work with someone else who's a little, and also
Did you in this age? It's like hard for me to believe that I'm sitting in Tucson and we're like at the epicenter of this coronavirus. It's like horrible situation.
God.
And I just could not even believe this. But I wonder about you. Like, are you like with your brothers and sisters down there? Are you guys getting together and like playing some sort of in-person, socially distanced jams with Matt? Like, are you in Victoria just jamming together? Like, how much are you able to get out? I don't even know what the weather's like. It's like 115 here, so it's a little bit. And I'm not going into any indoor spaces, but like, how are you getting stuff out of your system today?
Well, I haven't played with any musicians besides Victoria since it started, to answer that question. So since the beginning, my last gig was with the Dixie Chicks in L.A. on March 10th.
Wow.
So that's we did Ellen, and that was the last hit. I haven't played with. No, maybe we did a little video for Victoria with the band right after that. So that's about it. In Mexico. But I've done a ton of collaborating remotely. Victoria and I did a number of live stream concerts because she had a new album come out during this quarantine, so a big album for her. And so we were asked to do a lot of performances, which was really fun, challenging. Set up the whole room, lots of keyboards, lots of like guitars, all kinds of stuff. And we built a recording studio down here, so we've been recording a lot, and that's been the real dream. Is that for the first time in my life, I've gotten semi-proficient in the Pro Tools world, and recording stuff on my own, and collaborating with all kinds of awesome folks around the globe, really. So that's been a real blast, and we've also traveled and had some family time and some family obligations, stuff we needed to go help out with. So we went to South Florida for a month. So we were actually kind of out of the loop in terms of having creative space and time to work for a month. So it's been a little on and off, but just now this week I'm feeling extremely, extremely motivated and juiced on the creative stuff.
Wow.
Last night, Victoria and I stayed. Last night we ate dinner. We usually eat dinner late. We ate dinner around 10. And then around 11:30, I just fired up the studio, and we started going, and we were listening to old stuff, and then we were tracking new stuff, and that's there's nothing that feels better than that, you know.
You know, Erik Deutsch. You know, I've been thinking, like, out of all these interviews that I've done, I found a clip that kind of encapsulates what I believe my show is about, and also the kind of musician that I tend to pursue on my program. And I just wanted to play this audio clip for you, and we'll come back.
What we are as people, what we are as humans, never really changes. I mean, we all have a heart. We all come from the spirit. You know, I think what happens is over a period of time, or through culture and the cultural erosion and whatever you want to call it, our spirits and our souls get covered with a lot of complexity and a lot of garbage. You know, that what we are as people, what we are as humans, what we are as beings gets covered with a lot of trash. But what we are, in essence, is always there, because it has to be there, because that's what we are. So, you know, when something comes along, like something beautiful or something energetic or something that's inspiring, it rekindles that natural essence that's in all of us. And that's why you see different things happen at different times, you know, because people are made of love. People are made of hope. And if there's an opportunity for something that shows up that illustrates that, then it plugs that energy into people again. You know, so even though things look dark, or even though things look manipulated and whatever you want to call it right now, there's a lot of terminology. You know, what we are is infinite. What we are is always there.
Erik Deutsch, that was an interview I did 10 years ago with Ernie Watts. You know Ernie?
Wow.
Yeah.
I know who he is. I never met him.
Yeah, I mean, dude, and Erik, I mean, I truly, man, I mean, we're not like, you know, big buddies like Duck Dunn and Levon Helm, but I feel like, you know, you are somebody that had their heart in a good way broken open, and I wanted to ask you about if you could talk a little bit about the loss of your brother, and ultimately how often you have dreams about him, how often you guys visit each other, and ultimately looking back on it, how his death affected you as a person and as a player.
Okay, well, man, that's cool. Thanks for bringing Jonathan up, because
Absolutely.
I love talking about him. And one common one common miscalculation by folks that, you know, or people tend to think that maybe people don't want to talk about a loss, you know, and I guess sometimes that is true, of course, but I just love that so many of my friends and peers and musical, compadres were connected with him, knew him, understood him as a person, dug him, you know. So I love that I get to reminisce about Jonathan. And I mean, he passed, I guess, 18 years ago. Is that right? 19 years ago?
Wow.
A long time ago. It's getting on 20 years, you know. So how it affected me at the time was like he was my biggest fan. He was 2 years younger than me, just a little less than 2 years younger. He was my biggest fan. He was a larger than life person at age 22 when he passed, and that's just like pretty insane, you know, to look back on that and realize how much of an impact he made on me and so many folks by that young age. He was a supreme lover of music. he was a pianist like me, but I guess he wasn't quite on the same level, but he was working and doing gigs and in college, and so he was on his way to a music career in some way or another, And I just think that I don't know. I think that I'm still learning about what that loss, what effect it's had on me emotionally, and I think I learn more about that all the time. It's hard to say. It's a hard thing to quantify.
I mean, do you I feel like you're more open than most. I don't know. I mean, I always feel like through adversity. Well, first of all, what Ernie said, he goes, "What we are is infinite. What we are is always there." So, do you communicate? Do you have? Does he come visit you sometimes? Can you talk about that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, man. He pops up in dreams regularly, and
wow.
It used to be a lot more that I was like kind of. He would pop up in dreams, and I'd be kind of. He'd be there. We'd be doing normal stuff, and then I'd realize that he couldn't stay or that he wasn't really there, and it would be like sad kind of moments.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that like probably in the last 5 years, I'd say there's been less of that, and it's more just like, oh, there he is, that he's there, And it's kind of like it's one of those things when he's in a dream, you don't like right away be like, oh my God, there he is. It's kind of like it's just things are normal again, And but man, I find myself thinking like the kind of thing like, what would he think? Wouldn't he be proud? Wouldn't he like that? Wouldn't he like her? Wouldn't he like that tune? Wouldn't he be psyched about this? What would he think about this thing that I fucked up as? Would he be, that kind of thing. Like, where would he be with drugs and alcohol and how would we relate on that? Because we both were, at that age, we're little party animals, and and I've had my moments of excess and kind of like always working to kind of like balance that. And sometimes I wonder like where would he be? I don't have any kids yet. With Jonathan had a lot. Fat Mama, my band back then, he was like one of us.
Was he on? Did he go on tour with you? I would have been on tour with you guys, dude.
He would come on tour with us sometimes for sure. He was at a lot of shows. I don't know if he saw the most Fat Mama shows of anyone, but he's probably in the conversation. So he would just show up. He was a student at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill during the heyday of our band. So he was just kind of like all of a sudden he'd just be there, like he'd drive. Like I remember one time we just showed up at a gig in Vermont, in Burlington, Higher Ground, and he was just there. He was there, and I said, "What are you doing here?" And he had left Chapel Hill 2 a.m. driven to Vermont.
That's so. That's so beautiful, man. I just, to me, like, this is sort of leading into. I wanted you to talk. Not that everyone deals with numbing themselves, addiction. I mean, it's chronic problem, and we are living through an unprecedented time. And obviously, I wanted you to talk. This is what the Jake Feinberg show is about. I mean, if I'm going to interview David Clayton Thomas, which I did, we're going to talk about how his dad used to beat him up every day, and how when David became a Golden Gloves boxer, he beat his dad up, and then his dad called the cops on him. Or I'm going to ask Steve Gadd about being taken away from music because of his addiction. Or I want to go to those places because it's healing. It's healing to talk about these adversity, and I just feel like you have this. You're blessed to have a foundation where, you have your wife who's also a musician. You can collaborate, and you also are looking at this time like saying, okay, I'm going to take advantage of this time, and I'm not going to wallow in self-pity or whatever. And I just feel there's a lot of cats, and the longer this goes on. We just lost Joe Porcaro, the father of Jeff Porcaro, the father of the band Toto, and he was the most beautiful freaking dude and the sickest drummer ever. And I wanted you to talk to cats out there about it, that it's okay to go there, that it's okay to talk about your problems, because my fear is that the longer this dysfunction continues, that some people will want to check out. And I want you to talk to people out there. Now, it's not a pep talk. Just when you first got the news that your brother had passed, or how you remained resilient. We talked about that sort of bitterness that creeps in New York, and you said I'm a little bit different than most people. I agree with that. It's about how do you look at something? How can you respond? How can you be resilient? And what's your message to your brothers and sisters out there who don't have the resources or the capacity, or frankly the adversity? Maybe they've never faced this kind of adversity before. What would you say to them?
Yeah, great question, Jake, and I appreciate the essence of your show and the realness of you. Man.
It's the real deal, man. Yeah, it's the real deal.
Yeah, I think I think that I probably took cues from my dad and my mom, who were just super strong through that loss, that tragedy with my brother, and I just saw that they I think that when you have a loss, it's kind of like either you can kind of get bogged down in the tragedy of it, or you can kind of try to reflect fondly on the memories and try to live the future in a different way, look towards the future and live it, in the spirit of that loss. And like, even though it's not quite as that little statement I just made doesn't totally apply to this.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah.
But it does kind of, because it's like, what I think my advice is that cats are looking back like, I used to play gigs 5 nights a week, or I was supposed to go on a big tour this summer, like I was supposed to, with Dixie Chicks, or the Chicks now.
The Chicks, yeah, right.
They got a new name.
Yeah. That's right. It's like, woe is me kind of thing. I should have been doing.
Yeah, or also, and even if it's not woe is me, it's like kind of like, when's it going to come back?
Yeah, that's right.
When's that going to go again? And I think that my advice right now is to acknowledge, okay, we have always somebody who's less fortunate, and that's what I'm reminding myself is like, as much as I was psyched to work a big exciting tour this summer, like, there's lots of people who will never have the same job again, or who have lost their job permanently, or I think about some of my students that have gone to. I got a couple great students who are in college now, or children of friends that are and freshmen and sophomores in the college. They're coming up. That's a big time. Like, man, you never get that time back. You can never replicate those 18 to 20 and what the growth as a musician or as just a human. And I'm feeling for them. So what I'm saying is, for the musicians out there, like, what you need to do is we got to look toward the future and think about what we can do, not wait for things to come back to normal, because we just don't know when that's going to be, and there is a reality where it might not ever be quite the same, you know what I mean? So and I don't want to be, maybe it will be, hopefully it will be, but maybe it won't be, and maybe it'll be for the better, who knows? So I think that we gotta open our creative minds and our spirits to what's possible in the future, and what we can create, to make this, to lead us to the next stage. But something important that my man, shout out to Theo Bleckman, that he's kind of stressed to me since the beginning of this, was like, the other thing, man, is like, it's okay to not feel inspired. It's okay to not feel super creative. You don't have to keep up with everybody on Instagram. And it's changed a little bit.
I dig, man. It's true. It's true, yeah.
Yeah, I did that too, man. It's true. The first couple months was like kind of an explosion of creativity on Instagram and live streaming and releases. And I think it's chilled a little now for multiple reasons. But I think Theo is absolutely right. Like, it's okay to just be, to just exist, to just rest, to just think, to just read, to just exercise, to just cook. That's okay too, That's important stuff. And it's all about healing and maintaining and, preserving your energy and your spirit for what you need in the moment. So I think the key here is no pressure. Do what you feel you need to do. Ask for help. I've certainly delved into the realms of the therapy during this quarantine. And I've been, I check in periodically. When I can and when I can afford it, and when I need it. But like, that's a great resource. Don't, if you never did it, or you haven't done it in a while, or you've been thinking about doing it, that's a great thing. Just to talk and just get to the core of the stuff, that's going on.
I want to ask you, not that this relates to, your brother or anything, but part of the issue is people don't want to. I mean, this can go and extrapolate over to the systemic bias in our country that goes back hundreds of years. It can go back to the paralysis of solitude in the middle of coronavirus, and not seeking help. And I just wanted you to talk about, I mean, it's an ongoing process for everybody, but, one reason I've just been I have saliency, and one reason my show continues is, like, I really love myself a lot. Like, I'm not a selfish person, but I do love myself, and I don't have a lot, I don't feel a lot of shame or guilt. And I wanted you to talk to people about, like, how you've overcome, like, shame and guilt in your life, and that it's okay to, I mean, you talk about it, therapy as a resource, but that's spoken as somebody who's already at peace with who they are. And there's a lot of people that have a lot of shame, and they're hung up about these things that are stigmatized. And I just, especially for your peers, I'm just saying, people that, how have you learned to break away from those sort of, those chains of shame and guilt?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm still working on it, man. I mean, I'm happy for you, and
I'm still working on it too. I'm still working. I just realize it's a drag. There's no point in doing it, but you have to love yourself.
You got to. It's honesty, virtue, and just like responsibility, ownership, and transparency. These things are so important. With the respect that I want to be treated with, because it's become more important to me how I'm treated. You know what I mean? And I'm more vulnerable. I'm more emotional. I'm more in touch with it, I think. So, I just working all the time at yeah, exactly. Like breaking those chains down, being okay with where I'm at, who I am, what I've done, what I want to do, and I think marriage and a relationship with a really evolved person like Victoria has been super helpful.
Definitely. It's great.
Being around a good deep person always helps, and that's the other thing I want to say to people is, like, you don't have to find a therapist for help if that's not in the cards for whatever reason. Like, just a good friend, a good family member, just talking to people, talking about where you're at, and I think a lot of times people think, like, man, I don't want to put my stuff on somebody else, but the truth is that, like, I believe that humans actually really appreciate when people, not everybody, but there are a lot of humans out there that appreciate when people come to them with their deepest and darkest, dearest and realest shit, So, like, I think that's wrong when people say, oh, but I don't want to bother them. They don't, it's like, actually, they might appreciate you bothering them, because nothing makes somebody feel more like a valuable contributor to the society than helping a friend out or listening to a friend talk and giving advice. It always feels good for both parties, I think.
Just before I let you go, I do you think I can catch a hang with Victoria's dad?
Yeah, I think that is totally.
Because he's part of the. He's a cat, man.
You wouldn't believe.
I know. I believe me, but this is. I need to poke. I want to get some stuff out of him that you guys have never heard. I would love to catch a hang with that cat. And then the other thing I wanted to ask you, because we can work on that. But the other thing is, I remember the bowling alley story about Waylon and Johnny. And your mom's like, you know who those cats are. Do you think Waylon and Johnny Cash would have problems wearing masks today?
I mean, they were like freedom cats.
I know, man. That's what I'm saying.
They definitely did things their own way, but those are smart guys too, you know. And those are guys that cared about people and their community, and like, you know, it's as simple as Johnny Cash being like, I want to be in these prisons. These are my people. They need help. I bring them joy. I care about them, you know. And Waylon was for sure a people person who was concerned with other folks, you know, and cared about people. So I think that the mask thing comes down to it's, you know, maybe people want to mask it in like freedom, a civil rights issue, which is just like obviously bogus as hell.
Dude,
it's about caring enough for your neighbor to say, like, you know, I'm just going to do the right thing and not put anyone else at risk, you know. So that's what the mask issue is about to me. And you know, it also comes down to obviously education. A lot of people might not understand that, although shame on them for not understanding it, for not figuring it out.
Well, they don't want to. Yeah, I mean, listen. All I'm going to say is I'm getting custom made Eric Deutsch masks made, by the way, just for the record. So I'm going
to send me one.
Yeah, man. Honestly, we'll do it again. It's always very healing to hang with you, man, and just stay safe and have a ball, man. We'll talk soon.
Jake, I appreciate you. Same to you. Thanks for keeping me in your thoughts, and thanks for giving me this hour to feel good. I got a smile on my face, and let's see if we can't link you up with Alto Reed and I think you would enjoy that.
Dude, I need to hang with Alto Reed, man.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, be cool, man. Much love. Say hi to Victoria.
Okay, Jake. Take care. Be well. Be safe down there, okay?
Thank you, brother. You too. Peace.
Okay.
Yeah, late. We'll be back with Allison Laffey right after this.